Hello folks, this is Sullla speaking. I'm going to be giving you a few more thoughts that I have on Diablo 3 here. I'm going to be putting some video footage in the background if you want to watch. This is footage taken from Act 1 of Hell difficulty with my wizard character. If you'd also prefer to read a written version of this, I will link it in the description. I am putting up the video version of a written report that's also on my website. So again, if you'd rather just read it and not listen to me, you can feel free to check it out there. Anyway, with a couple more weeks past and Nightmare difficulty completed with my most advanced wizard character, I want to go into a little bit more detail about some of the mechanics of Diablo 3. There's plenty of different things I didn't have time to discuss in my initial video, or simply didn't notice during my first pass through the game. Seeing everything on a second path made many of the design decisions that went into the game more clear. And by the very nature of the subject matter, that means that this video is going to be more in-depth and in some ways more pedantic than the initial one that I put up, I guess about 2 to 3 weeks ago. Let me be clear, I still like Diablo 3, I think it's a good game, and I definitely recommend a purchase to anyone who liked the previous games and remains sitting on the fence. Now that said, there are some issues with the game that are not entirely to my liking, so let me go into a little bit more detail and give you some of these thoughts. I'll talk first a little bit about my character that I played through. I've played through in Nightmare and Normal. My wizard character relied on a fairly standard skill setup throughout Nightmare, one that I didn't change around too much. I would use Magic Missile on primary attack, Arcane Orb, that is Diablo 3's version of the Fireball skill, on the secondary attack. Then I would use one other attack skill, usually Hydra, very rarely Blizzard, along with a bunch of defense and utility skills, things like Diamond Skin, Teleport, and Energy Shield. I found that having more attack skills didn't really do anything because I would just run out of arcane power and found myself unable to use them. So I found myself using 3 attack skills and then 3 defensive utility skills. 3 attack skills, like I said, Hydra itself being somewhat of a utility skill, that proved to be plenty. The real star of the show was Diamond Skin, which I found to be almost mandatory when proceeding through the game. One of the big differences between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 is the problem of avoiding damage. In Diablo 2, there's a couple of features that allow you to avoid taking much damage as long as you have room to maneuver. You have the ability to run, which is not present at all in Diablo 3, and I consider that a good change. And the ability to run automatically makes you faster than nearly everything in the game. Monsters generally only appear on the edges of the screen, giving at least some time to react to their appearance, where you can kite them or run away or whatever. Ranged attacks tend to be pretty dodgeable, whether it's arrows or magic spells, or both of the above. The Bone Spirits that the Oblivion Knights use in Diablo 2 are difficult to deal with precisely because they're one attack that can't be avoided, not without running around and waiting for the spell timer to wear out. All of this has changed in Diablo 3. First of all, there's no run toggle at all, and many monsters, in fact most monsters in some areas, are equally as fast as your character or faster. Bosses also have tons of crowd control abilities, your Jailer, Waller, Freeze bosses, and so on, all of which forces your character to have some kind of disengage skill. All 5 classes have something of this sort, and you're clearly intended to make use of them. For the wizard, that would be teleport. And while I didn't have to use it that often, when I did need to teleport out of something, I found that I needed it immediately. Another problem is the way in which monsters will pop onto the screen. Tons of them will literally appear next to you, from out under the ground or out of the sky or whatever. You will often have almost no warning whatsoever before monsters are on top of your character and banging away. In one way that's a neat challenge, but in another way it's somewhat cheap and unfair. There's no way that I can hear the noise that tells a rockworm is about to pop out of the ground in the middle of a large fight, just to give one example. My character simply gets popped for X amount of undodgeable damage. Fun, that. I also found that for whatever reason, it's much harder to dodge ranged attacks in Diablo 3. This is partly due to particle speed. The arrows and spears that monsters throw tend to travel much faster than in Diablo 2. I could nearly always walk out of the way with such attacks in past games, and it just rarely seems to work in this one. Missiles just too fast. Secondly, due to some combination of hitbox detection or server lag, I constantly find myself getting hit by attacks that appear to miss. I swear that an arrow misses my character by a good 2 yards, and then I take the damage anyway. I have no idea quite what's going on here, but it's extremely frustrating and serves to lower the skill cap of the game. Why bother trying to dodge missiles and kite mobs if I just get hit by the projectiles anyway? My answer to all of this was to rely very heavily on the Diamond Skin skill, which grants you a temporary shield against damage up to a cap. The closest skill that I can think of from Diablo 2 is the Necromancer's Bone Armor, although Diamond Skin only lasts for a few seconds before going on cooldown. Nevertheless, you're practically invincible for the 6 seconds that Diamond Skin lasts, at least in normal and nightmare difficulties anyway. It will just block all the damage. I feel that this is somewhat cheap and uninteresting as a skill, but in the end I found myself using it non-stop anyway. It was the only way to prevent myself from taking non-stop damage from all enemies. Against anything ranged, it was just impossible to avoid taking hits. Completely impossible in my experience. You might as well just throw on the Diamond Skin so you don't have to rely on health or drops constantly. It was the same story against melee attackers in the end stages of the game too. Nearly everything is a gap closer or a blink attack at the end of the game, and I simply had no choice but to turn on Diamond Skin in every fight. Impossible to maintain distance and kite against many of these foes. This made the gameplay somewhat one-dimensional, and I have to say it wasn't as interesting as I had initially hoped. I feel as though certain skills are almost mandatory on some of these classes, and I'm afraid that it's going to remove some of the potential for experimentation and different builds if certain skills just seem to be mandatory on your characters. It's been interesting watching different reactions from different players about the overall difficulty level of Diablo 3. I've seen a lot of people claiming that the game is too easy, which hasn't been my experience at all. Perhaps their experience is from nothing but 4-player co-op, with frequent use of the auction house to outfit their characters in strong gear, or simply trading gear between characters as each one levels up. I really don't know. Getting an excellent weapon drop or purchase certainly has a drastic effect on the overall challenge level of this game. Or maybe these players just don't consider dying to be a major issue. After all, there's almost no penalty for dying in Diablo 3, and you can retry the same fight over again immediately. Repeated dying in an online party of 4 has even emerged as somewhat of a zerging tactic for advancing in Inferno, from what I've heard. Anyway, I don't believe that Diablo 3 is too easy at all, at least going by my definition. Playing almost exclusively solo without a follower and without touching the auction house, I found the latter stages of the game to be rather difficult, and I consider myself to be a pretty good player at the Diablo games. One thing that distinguishes Diablo 3 is the scaling challenge level within each difficulty. Act 1 is by far the easiest, followed by Act 2, and then things get significantly harder in the latter stages of Act 3 and Act 4. The last act is very short, but it's a real pain in the rear from a challenge standpoint. Several of the bosses are incredibly unfair and cheap in Act 4. Well, let me explain in a little bit more detail. My character suffered 4 deaths total in Nightmare in 2 pairs of 2. The first 2 deaths both occurred in the later stages of Act 3, both times against an elite mob of fast attributed phase beasts. The phase beasts are really nasty opponents for a casting class, melee opponents with an innate teleport ability such that they can always close the distance next to you. Unlike most other monsters with a gap closer, they have both high HP totals and deal very heavy damage. Other monsters, like the little frogs that can latch onto you with their tongues, they have significantly less of both, less damage and less health. So I ran across 2 phase beast elite groups with the fast boss attribute, which means they're much faster than my character, and they can keep teleporting on top of me, and there's 5 of them. In both cases, instant death, nothing I could do about it. I drank potions, I teleported away, I used Diamond Skin, it didn't matter. After the second time that this happened, I realized that I needed to come up with a better strategy or I was going to be dying endlessly whenever this combination happened to appear. What I came up with was really the cheesiest solution imaginable. I call this the doorway shuffle. The instant that you see a teleporting, extra fast, or whatever elite group, run away as fast as possible. See if you can string out the elites and fight them one at a time, although this is much harder to do in Diablo 3 than Diablo 2 in my experience. Regardless of whether this is successful or not, keep running until you reach the doorway into this particular area. Fight the enemies at the doorway and deal as much damage as you can, then step out of the door into the previous map. Now you're completely safe, and you can wait for cooldowns to reset and or regain health. You can go back to town and heal your character if desired. Then, when ready, step back through the door again and fight the previous boss group, with the damage you inflicted before still present. Rinse and repeat as necessary until they're dead. It's unbelievably cheap to fight this way, but you know what? Elite mobs that can teleport endlessly and swarm you under are also unbelievably cheap. In a previous Diablo game, I could fight that battle by drinking potions off the belt and do a whole belt fight to survive. You know, I could drink 5 or 6 or 10 full rejuve potions and just, brute force my way through the battle. But nope, not an option here because of the way the potions work. All potion usage on a 30-second cooldown. I actually do like that idea, but there's a crippling problem here. The potions don't restore enough health. They're nowhere near sufficient because they don't scale up properly with game difficulty. In normal, you keep getting new potions with each act that will pretty much take your character to full health when used, and that's pretty awesome. I like that idea, I thought it was great. At the beginning of Nightmare, I noticed that the potions were starting to fall off a bit. They weren't keeping up with the huge rate at which my health orb was increasing. By the end of Nightmare, they were just a complete joke. Potions would restore 4,500 or 6,500 health. Meanwhile, my character has 20,000 health. So, yeah, that really doesn't help that much, thanks. It needs to be one of two ways. Either we can drink as many potions as we want, even if they're weaker, or potions are on a cooldown and they restore essentially all of your health. That is, they're basically like a full rejuve from Diablo 2. One way or the other. Sucky potions that are also on a 30-second cooldown are unacceptable. To me, the current design is really not fair when you have a difficult running battle. It pretty much forces you to resort to cheese like the doorway shuffle, or some other way of disengaging to survive those really difficult fights. And I say, blah to that. I've mentioned before that I like most of the boss fights in this game, and I do enjoy most of them. However, the huge exception to that rule would be the Act 4 boss fights, all of which are cheap and unfair in one way or another. The first battle against Iskatu, however you pronounce that. But anyway, the first battle swarms the player with vast numbers of little shadow beasts without any warning whatsoever. This fight resulted in a death for me in normal because I had no idea what to expect or how to counter it. It's kind of a dumb battle because it has a few narrow solutions. Find some combination of skills that deal area of effect or AoE damage while keeping you safe. For the wizard class, that's the Archon skill, which rapes this battle incredibly hard and turns it into a complete cakewalk. I regard it as a stupid battle though, a pure variant buster that relies on certain narrow combination of skills to succeed. I can't say that I really like this one. Rakanoth, the next boss, has a nearly undodgeable teleport attack that hits the player from off-screen. You're taught from every previous boss fight to keep your distance, and then Rakanoth changes that by tele-attacking you from off-screen for huge damage. Very, very lame. The sad thing is that this battle isn't truly that difficult, it just requires the player to memorize when the teleport attack is coming and react appropriately. It's a pretty cheap fight though because the whole gimmick is you don't get to see the attack coming, therefore getting no time to react. That is, he charges you from off screen where you literally can't see the attack coming. It's a teleport attack. You just have to memorize the pattern ahead of time. It's really not where game design should be in this day and age. You shouldn't be requiring players to memorize attack patterns in order to get through. That's just lazy design, in my opinion. The mother of all cheap fights, however, is the one against Iswal. I died here in normal, and my character died here again, twice in Nightmare. This is the single biggest fight in the whole game, the single biggest cheese fight in the whole game. Iswal slowly lumbers after your character, not much of doing anything for most of the fight. Then he will pull out his charge attack, which is virtually a one-hit kill. I don't know the exact damage numbers, but my wizard character was doing fine in this battle, had about half of her life remaining. Then I was charged, and bam, I'm simply dead. Half my life orb just gone instantly. One hit charge, and then I'm dead. 10,000 health gone in a flash. And again, that's 10,000 health in Nightmare, not Hell or Inferno, I might add. That kind of nonsense has no place in a game like this. It's just another freaking Durio puzzle from Diablo 2. That is a battle with narrow solutions wherein you get killed if you don't pick one or two of them. For the Wizard class, the answer is to prevent Iswal from ever getting next to you. Use Blizzard to slow and Hydra to deal damage passively, and just keep running away. Eventually, Blizzard and Hydra will get the kill. Can never let yourself get close to Iswal, or he can virtually one-shot your character with his charge attack. What a load. This is not an interesting or fun battle, just a cheap trick on Blizzard's part. Now that I know what's coming, I can probably survive better, but the battle is just so out of character with the rest of the way the game's designed. Most of the bosses are handled quite well. They have numerous attacks that you can see coming and react accordingly. Even Belial at the end of Act 2 is a better fight, although I do think that the constrained space there is pretty unfair, particularly the appearing and disappearing stakes in high difficulty. That's very difficult because you have no room to fight or maneuver. The last battle in Act 4 against Diablo I actually think is done quite well. It's a tough but fair encounter, requiring execution for long minutes on end, but not overly punitive in any way. For example, against Diablo, his really nasty attack is his bone prison, but you actually do have a chance to see it coming. There's a graphic on the screen that shows it's about to appear, so you have time to react accordingly. All of his attacks are that way. So the Diablo fight is pretty well done. It's just the rest of Act 4, though, I don't really think I'll be hanging out there very much. Those bosses are not well designed. I mentioned before about the issues that I have with health pots in this game, so let me say a little bit more about that. The real problem is not the health pots per se. It's a rather larger problem with the issue of scaling. Diablo 3 has a ton of scaling, more scaling than just about any other game that I can remember. The game starts out very easy, almost insultingly easy, and gets progressively more difficult as one goes along. In addition to this, the items that drop and the stats on the monsters continue to scale as well, both from act to act and from difficulty level to difficulty level. Your character also scales at nearly the same rate, not quite keeping up with the monsters, as things like vitality and character life increase massively as levels go up. Just to give you an example of this, at the start of the game, 1 point of vitality is equal to 10 hit points. At character level 60, 1 point of vitality is equal to 35 hit points. And again, that's per point, mind you. None of this is inherently problematical in and of itself, but the rate at which the scaling takes place can be pretty insane. Check out the stats on an enemy from Act 1 across several different difficulty levels. So I'll just read them here for you. They're in text on my website. An Act 1 ghoul in normal has 40 to 80 hit points, deals 43 damage. In Nightmare, 339 to 678 hit points, 397 damage. Hell difficulty, 2800 to 5600 hit points, 3600 damage, and Inferno, 13,000 to 26,000 hit points, 180,000 damage. Now, this game scales up incredibly fast, as those numbers seem to indicate. Just looking at the damage, 40 damage to 400 damage to 3600 damage to 180,000 damage. Again, this game scales up at an incredibly fast pace, significantly faster than previous Diablo games. You'll find that gear even one act out of date will quickly fall by the wayside as new stuff keeps dropping that outclasses what you previously had. The only time that you'll wear something for a long time is if you happen to get a nice drop from a boss with a monster level significantly higher than the normal critters. The act end bosses on normal are probably the best example of this, where you're guaranteed to get rare item drops at a much higher monster level than the other enemies you fight. When I walked into Tristram for Hell on the first time, I instantly found a weapon in the store that was better than the one I had used all through Act 4 Nightmare. In other words, what I already had was instantly obsolete the minute I walked into a new difficulty level. This is a deliberate design decision on Blizzard's part. They want new and better stuff to be dropping constantly, because it serves to funnel people to the online auction house. Something that's good right now will be obsolete 5 levels later. Now, in one way, I can see what they're going for with the design. You're constantly upgrading your weapons, constantly getting stronger. It sounds great, right? Well, again, the problem is if you're not buying things from the auction house. If you're constantly picking up new stuff online as it gets unlocked by your character level, you keep getting stronger and stronger. It's great. It's awesome. If you have to wait for something good to drop in the game while playing normally, well, sucks to be you, buddy. Blizzard doesn't design the game around you. If you get unlucky, then you're just out of luck. Blizzard certainly doesn't design the game around people playing pure play, people not trading items, people not buying stuff off the auction house. They're not going to do that when there's untold thousands of people willing to fork over real money just to make the game easier. This is the contribution that Facebook games have made to the world of gaming, and Blizzard has designed Diablo 3 with that system in mind. In other words, you can quite literally pay for power in this game. Now again, this is a player versus enemy game, PvE, so none of that really has to dampen my experience, right? In a sense, no, but then again, in a real sense, yes, it actually does affect my experience playing the game. Blizzard clearly balances item drop rates and the difficulty level of monsters with the auction house in mind. They've been pretty open about stating that they lowered the drop rate of rare and legendary items for auction house purposes. Can't have too many legendary items floating around, then people would be less willing to buy them online. None of this is technically game killing, but it is a huge disappointment nonetheless. I was looking forward to crafting recipes and making my own legendary stuff at the blacksmith, but how naive. The drop rates for crafting recipes are infinitesimally small due to auction house purposes. I'll never be seeing any of those things unless I'm willing to devote endless hours to replaying Inferno mode, and that's just not going to happen. The extreme rate of scaling has other insidious effects as well beyond the item economy. Because everything scales so incredibly fast as you progress through the game, which again is a conscious design decision designed to encourage frequent online purchases, it's basically impossible to play online with other people who are above or below your character level. A difference of a single act between characters would be fairly trivial in Diablo 2, at least outside of Act 1 or Act 2 in normal. In Diablo 3, being a single act ahead means that your character virtually enters God mode when replaying previous areas. When going back to earlier areas, your character is unkillable and the game is boring for your friends because you're so much stronger than everyone else. If you're venturing ahead into a more advanced part of the game, your character is completely worthless and will be totally ineffective for anything beyond crowd control. The phenomenon is far more pronounced in Diablo 3 than in the previous 2 games in the series, and it all goes back to the decision to have everything scale so hard. Blizzard uses their online servers to disguise this problem. That is, the matchmaking will automatically put you in a game with characters at the same level and same location in the game. But I see this as a real problem. It's just hard to play online with friends unless you have characters at exactly the same point in time in terms of game progress. Someone's not having fun otherwise. When I played online with Varus Nox, his character was a mere 3 levels ahead, and even that small of a difference was notable. I had more vitality, but his character had fully 1,000 more health, which was a good 10 to 15% total life, again, purely due to 3 levels of character difference. He had also found a really sweet Demon Hunter bow, and I hadn't been quite as fortunate, so his character was dealing 1800 DPS to my 1000 DPS. The minor difference between character levels and the presence of one good weapon was enough to relegate me to second fiddle status. Now, maybe not everyone cares, and maybe some people even like this kind of thing. For instance, it's extremely easy to God mode characters past challenges by using more advanced friend accounts. I see this as a real issue, however. There's just too much gap in this game. If your characters aren't very closely matched, the co-op mode turns into an uneven experience. Too easy for one player, too hard for someone else. I'd also like to mention that account security has turned into a major issue for Diablo 3. Huge numbers of accounts are getting hacked and having all of their items sold off and their gold transferred to online bot accounts. There's all sorts of heated rhetoric flying around about this right now, and I'm not enough of a tech person to know how or why these accounts are getting hacked. The main point is that this has developed into a serious issue, and it feels necessary right now to use an email authenticator just to play the darn game in safety. Blizzard has had to delay the real money portion of their auction house because this has turned into such a pressing concern. At least right now, it's just in-game items and in-game gold getting hacked and not actual financial information. All of these issues have led me to question the decision to make Diablo 3 online only and place so much attention on the auction house. Yes, if it all goes according to plan, it is going to make Blizzard a ton of money, at least beyond what they're already making. At the same time, it's just impossible for me to ignore the deleterious effects that the auction house is having on gameplay, and the very serious problems with lag, account hacking, and server downtime that's aggravating the player base. There's a lot of mad customers out there about this. Would it really have been that big of an issue to allow players to opt out of the whole online thing and simply create single-player characters if they wanted to do so? I'd be happy to authenticate my account each time I played if I could just get out of the online mode afterwards and avoid lag and hacking and all that other crud. Diablo 3 is going to sell over 10 million copies before its run is done. It actually moved over 6 million copies in just the first week alone. At some point, shouldn't Blizzard just be happy with all these sales and not keep trying to force more online transactions onto its player base? I mean, it's cool for those who want it, but not all of us do, you know? It would be nice if our opinions were considered as well, and there was some kind of a single-player option so you could just, get off of Battle.net if you wanted to. Anyway, like I said at the beginning, this was going to involve a bit more nitpicking and criticism than my first thoughts. I think that about 85% of what Diablo 3 does is really great and makes for a fabulous gaming experience. The other 15% though is unnecessarily aggravating and just head-scratching from a design perspective. That's actually almost exactly the same way I felt about Diablo 2 though, a mixture of mostly good and some incredibly frustrating ideas. I can see why Blizzard made the choices that they did from a design perspective, and yet many of them aren't proving to work out in quite the way that Blizzard was expecting. I'll be interested to see where they go from here in the patching process. Variant characters are still a little ways off from me. I need more time to become familiar with the gameplay and the various combinations of skills. I'd like to be able to play through the game deathless, and if I can't do that, then I still need more practice, and I'm not really sharp enough to start playing variant characters. In other words, dying 80 times just to progress through the game, not really my style. Anyway, stay tuned. I will put up more videos here with more thoughts as I have them, and at some point in the upcoming weeks or months, I will start to play some serious variant characters, and I will be putting stuff up on my website and also here on the YouTube channel related to that. Anyway, once again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys again soon. Until then, take care.